The kingdom of Avarice was known far and wide for its emerald valleys, towering marble palaces, and the kindness of its rulers. At its heart stood King Aldric, a man both loved and feared, and Queen Selene, whose beauty was often compared to the glow of the full moon. But above all, the kingdom cherished their daughter, Princess Liora. Born beneath a rare celestial alignment, many whispered she carried within her the fate of avarice itself. Gentle, clever, and unafraid of wandering beyond the gilded halls, Liora was adored by the people. Yet such light inevitably casts long shadows, and darker forces watched her every step. The story began on the eve of her 17th birthday. The palace had been alive with celebration, lanterns swayed in the night air, music spilled from every chamber, and nobles from distant lands flocked to Avarice with gifts. Liora, though, felt restless. Surrounded by polished jewels and endless flattery, she longed for the simpler company of the kingdom's gardens and the laughter of its common folk. Under the silver light of the moon, she slipped away from the grand feast, seeking a moment of quiet among the rose gardens beyond the palace walls, but silence was not what greeted her. As she stepped through the winding paths, she heard whispers, low voices carrying words she could not fully understand. Following the sound, she came upon the shadowy outlines of two cloaked figures near the old fountain. Their movements were quick and secretive, their language unfamiliar. Before she could call for the guards, one of them glanced up. Their eyes, gleaming unnaturally pale in the dark, locked with hers. In that single instant, Liora felt an icy chill run through her body, as if something ancient had marked her. She turned to flee, but the world seemed to collapse in on itself. A strange smoke swirled around her feet, thick as fog, pressing in from all sides. The faint fragrance of iron and ash filled her lungs, and her vision blurred. She tried to cry out, but the sound was swallowed by the air. The last thing she saw was the pale figure raising a hand, a faint green glow pulsing in their palm like a dying ember. Then, darkness claimed her. By dawn, the palace was in chaos. Guards scoured every hall and courtyard. Servants whispered of vanished footsteps, of roses crushed where none should have walked. The king, usually so composed, stood pale with fury and fear, while Queen Selene wept silently in her chambers. Princess Liora was gone, vanished without a trace. And with her disappearance, a cold shadow seemed to spread across the kingdom of Avarice, as though the land itself knew something terrible had begun.
The hallway outside the princess's chambers was lit only by the pale blue shimmer of moonlight pooling across the marble tiles. Liora followed quietly, each step guided, not fully by her own will, but by a gentle pull radiating from the red shoes. Ahead of her, the 12 princesses moved gracefully, as if in a trance. Their silk nightgowns flowed behind them like pale rivers gliding toward an unseen ocean. Liora had walked these halls her entire life, yet she realized with a shiver that she had never seen the palace at this hour. Everything seemed sharper, thinner, as if the world were stretched like fabric being tugged from its seams. The princesses stopped at a faded tapestry depicting the founding of Eldoria. Without a word, the eldest, Princess Eleonora, pressed her palm to the corner of the woven design. A soft click sounded, followed by a long exhale of stale air as a hidden stone panel swung inward. A narrow stairway spiraled downward into darkness. Liora's breath hitched. She had heard palace legends of secret passages, escape tunnels, war hideouts, and ancient chambers, but never one that led beneath the royal wing. The sisters stepped inside, their movements synchronized, their faces calm yet strangely hollow. Liora hesitated, but the shoes nudged her forward, urging her to keep pace. Down they went, deeper and deeper, past the familiar scent of lavender candles and parchment, into air that smelled of damp stone and forgotten time. Torches flickered to life on their own as the princesses descended, casting trembling shadows across the rough walls. Leora's heart pounded, every beat louder than her steps. She wanted to call out, ask what they were doing, why they moved like sleepwalkers, what secret they were hiding so desperately, but her voice felt trapped behind her ribs. Even the red shoes seemed to quiet her, as though they wanted her to see first and question later. At the bottom of the spiral stair, the princesses entered a vast cavern that Liora never could have imagined beneath the palace. The ceiling arched high above them, dotted with crystals that glowed like stars trapped in stone. A silver river flowed through the cavern, casting ripples of pale light onto the mossy floor. In the center stood an ancient wooden bridge, its railings carved with intricate patterns of dancers, moons, and swirling flames. The sisters walked across it with practiced ease. But as Liora stepped onto the bridge, the symbols beneath her feet ignited with a faint ruby glow, reacting to the red shoes she wore. For the first time, a few of the princesses turned sharply toward her, the spell of silence breaking just slightly. Princess Seraphine, the third eldest, whispered, "Liora, you shouldn't be here." Her voice trembled with fear, not anger. But before Liora could reply, music, soft, distant, haunting, began to hum through the cavern. The bridge vibrated gently beneath their feet as a doorway of light formed at its far end, swirling with iridescent colors like the surface of a dream. The princesses exchanged resigned glances, sorrow flickering in their eyes. Then, without warning, the door opened fully, revealing another realm beyond. Liora felt the red shoes pulse with anticipation. Whatever lay ahead was the secret the princesses had buried for years, and now she was about to walk directly into it. Crossing through the shimmering doorway felt like stepping into a breath held by the world itself. Liora braced for cold or heat, for rushing wind or blinding light, but instead she felt weightless, suspended between two heartbeats. Then her feet touched solid ground again, the pull of the red shoes softening as the world around her sharpened into focus. The sky above them was a deep indigo, brighter than night yet darker than dusk, as if painted with the glow of 1,000 distant stars. Towering willow trees draped with silver leaves swayed gently, though no wind stirred. A wide path of pale stones stretched forward, leading toward a shimmering palace made entirely of glass-like crystal. The 12 princesses exhaled as one, their postures relaxing in a way Liora had never seen in Eldoria. Here, they moved differently, less like dutiful daughters and more like dancers waking from a long sleep. Their nightgowns shifted into gowns of moon thread and soft gold the moment they stepped onto the stone path. Liora felt the magic brush her skin, cool and humming, but her clothes did not change. Instead, the red shoes glowed faintly, as if claiming her as an outsider. Princess Eleonora approached her with eyes full of conflict, fear mixed with relief, guilt tangled with hope. "We never wanted you to discover this," she whispered. "But now that you have, you must know the truth." Before Eleonora could explain, distant drums awakened the air, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing from the center of the crystalline palace. The ground vibrated gently with each pulse. Liora felt the shoes stirring again, urging her forward, but the sisters stepped defensively in front of her, forming a protective circle. "Not yet," Seraphine murmured. "The enchantment is stronger tonight." As if responding to her words, the silver willows around them lifted their drooping branches, revealing glowing fruits that glimmered like lantern-lit pearls. Shapes moved behind the trees, graceful, silent, and not quite human. Their silhouettes were tall and slender, with movements too fluid to belong to mortals. Leora's breath caught. She had stepped into a world that mirrored Eldoria's beauty, but twisted it into something eerie and enchanted. Princess Maribel, usually the most cheerful of the sisters, placed a trembling hand on Leora's shoulder. "For 7 years," she said softly, "we have been bound to return here every night. A curse or a debt, depending on how one sees it. We dance in the Crystal Palace until dawn, unable to stop, unable to escape." Liora stared at her cousins, horror rising like cold water inside her. She had seen their exhaustion, their growing silence, their half-hidden dread. Now she understood why they moved through the daylight as if shadows clung to their bones. But what debt could force 12 princesses into endless nights of dancing? And what did the red shoes have to do with this realm? Before Liora could speak, the drums quickened, and the trees parted to reveal a procession of masked figures dressed in shimmering attire. They bowed deeply, their masks carved with spirals of moonlight. A tall figure at the front, its mask gilded with ruby streaks, extended a hand toward the princesses, as if beckoning them toward the palace. The princesses stiffened. Liora felt the red shoes tighten around her feet, their warmth turning urgent, as if warning her. This was no simple dance. And whatever magic ruled this realm had just noticed that there were 13 girls instead of 12. And in that moment, the night began to shift. The masked procession glided toward the princesses, their feet barely touching the luminous ground. Liora felt the air tighten, as if the realm itself had paused to observe this moment. The tall figure with the ruby-streaked mask stepped forward, its presence both elegant and unsettling. When it spoke, its voice sounded distant, layered with echoes, like multiple people speaking at once. 12 stars of Eldoria, it intoned. Your moon cycle continues. The ballroom awaits you. The princesses bowed their heads, their shoulders sinking under the weight of an invisible burden. Only Liora remained upright, trembling. The masked figure's gaze shifted toward her, lingering on the red shoes. And this one, she is new. Liora's instinct urged her to step back, but the red shoes held her firm, pulsing as though alive. Princess Eleonora quickly stepped between Liora and the masked figures. She is not part of the pact, she said sharply. She followed by accident. A murmur rippled through the masked dancers, their heads tilting in eerie unison. The ruby-masked leader ran a slender hand along the air, tracing glowing symbols that flickered like embers. The shoes are awakened, it said. She is chosen. Whether you allow it or not. Liora's stomach twisted. Chosen for what? A cold certainty crept through her. Coming here had not been an accident. The shoes had led her because they were connected to something older than the curse itself. The princesses exchanged glances filled with urgency and fear. Seraphine grasped Liora's hand. Stay by us, no matter what happens. With the masked figures surrounding them, the group was shepherded along the gleaming path toward the Crystal Palace. The structure loomed ahead like a cathedral built from frozen moonlight, each tower refracting the sky into swirling ribbons of color. As the palace doors opened, music poured out, haunting melodies played on unseen instruments, twining through the air like silver smoke. Liora felt the shoes respond immediately, tugging her forward with increasing strength, as if they recognized the melody. Around her, the princesses stiffened. They knew this music too well. Inside the grand ballroom, the floor stretched endlessly, polished to a mirror-bright sheen that reflected the starlit ceiling above. Crystal chandeliers, dripping with shimmering droplets of light, swayed gently though there was no breeze. Masked dancers filled the hall, spinning in slow, elegant circles. The moment the princesses crossed the threshold, their gowns flared and glowed, and they were pulled into the dance as if caught by invisible ribbons. Liora watched in horror as her cousins moved with desperate grace, each step perfectly executed, each twirl filled with both beauty and suffering. Their faces held serenity, but their eyes begged silently for freedom. The shoes seized Liora's feet, and she sucked in a sharp breath as her legs began to move. Not by her command, but by the spell woven into the music. She fought to control her steps, but resisting only made the magic stronger. The red shoes spun her toward the center of the ballroom, weaving her among dancers whose faces were hidden behind porcelain masks. Liora's breath quickened as she realized the truth. The dancers weren't human, not entirely. Their movements were too fluid, their shadows bending wrong, their presence tinged with cold magic. As Liora spiraled deeper into the dance, the ruby-masked figure approached her again, its voice echoing inside her mind. You bear the shoes of the first dancer, it whispered. The one who broke our sacred bond long ago. And now the cycle stirs anew. Liora's heart thundered. The curse wasn't just a punishment, it was a reenactment of a story older than the kingdom itself, and she had just stepped into the role of its missing piece. The ballroom's haunting melody rose sharply, its tempo shifting from graceful to frantic, as though the realm sensed that something forbidden was unfolding. Liora felt the red shoes blaze beneath her, their heat climbing up her legs like molten ribbons. The princesses were still caught in the relentless rhythm, spinning with forced elegance as the masked dancers tightened their circle. The ruby-masked figure advanced toward Liora with steps that were too smooth, too silent, its presence heavy with ancient authority. "First dancer's heir," it murmured, "you reopen the cycle. Your arrival seals what was broken." Liora's fear twisted, but beneath it, a spark of defiance ignited. She would not become another prisoner of this realm. The memory of her cousins' exhausted faces, day after day, hiding their suffering, strengthened her resolve. Liora forced her trembling hands upward, grasping the ruby glow in the air that streamed toward her like threads of living fire. The ballroom trembled. The masked dancers paused mid-spin, their forms flickering like candle flames in a draught. The princesses gasped as the cycle faltered for the first time in years. Princess Eleonora called out above the music, her voice sharp with desperation. "Liora, the shoes respond to your will, your heart. They were made to break the pact, not bind it." The truth struck Liora like a bell. The shoes weren't meant to enslave, but to free. With the music swelling into a chaotic storm, Liora closed her eyes and let the power of the shoes surge through her, not as fear, but as protection, as choice. She spun deliberately, a single motion cutting cleanly through the enchanted tempo. Her movement created a shockwave that rippled across the ballroom. The chandeliers shattered into trails of stardust, the mirrored floor fractured like frost under sun. The masked dancers stumbled, their forms losing coherence. For the first time, the ruby-masked leader recoiled. "Stop," it hissed, voice cracking with static. "This realm survives through the dance." But Liora understood the deeper truth. This realm fed on the dancers' forced joy and stolen exhaustion. She grasped the hands of the nearest princess, Maribel, and pulled her out of the collapsing rhythm. One by one, the other sisters stumbled toward her, breaking the circle. As they gathered, clinging to one another, Liora stomped the ground with the red shoes. A searing ruby burst of magic shot outward, slicing through the last threads of the cursed melody. The spell shattered. The masked dancers froze like statues before dissolving into clouds of silver dust. The ruby-masked figure let out a hollow, echoing cry as the crystal palace cracked from foundation to spire, its shimmering walls melting into fading light. The realm itself began to unravel, stars falling, paths dissolving, twilight thinning into emptiness. "Hold on!" Liora shouted, gripping her cousins as the ground beneath them crumbled. The red shoes flared bright, then burst into pure light, enveloping all 13 girls. The world twisted, dissolved, and reformed. When the light cleared, they found themselves once again inside the underground cavern beneath Eldoria, standing upon the ancient bridge. The portal snapped shut behind them like a blown candle flame, leaving only silence and the soft shimmer of the silver river. The red shoes, now resting on Liora's feet, grew cool and gently loosened, as if sighing in relief. Then the magic seeped out of them entirely, and they faded into gray leather, ordinary at last. The princesses collapsed into relieved laughter and tears, embracing Liora with overwhelming gratitude. For the first time in 7 years, when dawn touched the horizon, the princesses did not feel the weight of another forced night awaiting them. The curse had been broken. Days later, the king and queen listened in stunned silence as the sisters explained everything. Liora became the quiet hero of Eldoria, a girl who stepped into a nightmare realm and changed its fate through courage, compassion, and choice. The hidden stairway was sealed forever, and peace returned to the palace halls. As for the shoes, Liora placed them safely in her sketching room, their ordinary grayness a reminder of the extraordinary magic they once held. And though the kingdom often celebrated her bravery, Liora remained humble. Knowing the truth, she had not saved her cousins alone. Their love for one another had broken the cycle. But whenever moonlight hit the shoes just right, a faint red shimmer flickered across them, quiet, gentle, and harmless. A sign, perhaps, that magic never truly disappears. It only waits for the right heart to call it forth again.